The gunshot that shattered the evening calm sent a flock of ravens scattering into the crimson sky above Alta, Colorado. Josephine Parker pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of her father's general store, her heart hammering against her ribs as the commotion in the street grew louder. It was 1878, and the mining town that had once seemed so full of promise now felt like a prison. "Get back here, you thieving rat!" The familiar voice of Sheriff Wilkins boomed through the dusty Main Street, followed by another gunshot. Josephine peered around the corner just in time to see a tall figure in a dark coat vault over a water trough and disappear between two buildings. The sheriff, red-faced and wheezing, stopped in the middle of the street, holstering his pistol with a curse. "Did you see which way he went, Miss Parker?" Wilkins called out when he spotted her. She shook her head, though she had seen perfectly well. There was something in the stranger's desperate flight that stirred her sympathy. "I was inside, Sheriff. What happened? New fellow in town. Caught him cheating at cards over at the Silver Dollar." Wilkins wiped his brow with a handkerchief. "Don't you worry, Miss Parker. We'll catch him." Josephine nodded politely, but as the sheriff ambled away, she found herself glancing toward the narrow passage between the buildings. She shouldn't get involved. Her father had warned her countless times about the dangerous men who passed through Alta. But curiosity had always been her downfall. As twilight deepened into night, Josephine finished closing the store. Her father had gone to Denver for supplies and wouldn't return for days. She locked the front door and made her way up the back stairs to their living quarters, lighting the oil lamp in the kitchen. The windows were open to catch the cool evening breeze, and as she moved to close them, she froze. A shadow shifted on the small balcony outside. "Don't scream," a deep voice said softly. "I ain't here to hurt you." Josephine's hand flew to her throat, but she didn't scream. The man from the street stood just outside her window, his features clearer now in the lamplight. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 25, with sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of a summer storm. A gun hung at his side, and dried blood stained his white shirt. "You're hurt," she said, surprising herself with her calm. "It's nothing." He glanced over his shoulder. "I need a place to hide, just for tonight. The sheriff says you're a cheat." A smile flickered across his face, transforming it. "The sheriff says a lot of things." "Why should I help you? I don't even know your name." He stepped closer to the window, and she could smell leather and gunpowder. "Zachary Zimmerman. But names don't matter much out here, do they?" "They do to me, Mr. Zimmerman." His expression grew serious. "Look, I didn't cheat, but I did win a lot of money from a man who doesn't like losing. The sheriff's in his pocket." Josephine studied him. Her father would be furious if he knew she was even talking to this man. But there was something in his eyes, a weariness beyond his years, a flash of integrity beneath the rough exterior. "Are you armed?" she asked. He patted the gun at his hip. "Always." "What's your story, Mr. Zimmerman?" "What brought you to Alta?" The cowboy's jaw tightened. "Don't ask," he said, his voice suddenly hard. "It's better if you don't know." Josephine hesitated, then made a decision that would change everything. "I won't, if you stay." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "If I stay." "Just for tonight," she clarified quickly. "There's a small storage room behind the kitchen. You can rest there, and in the morning you'll leave, and you'll tell me nothing about yourself or why the sheriff wants you." Zachary's gaze traveled over her face as if memorizing each feature. "Why would you help me?" "Maybe I don't like Sheriff Wilkins much either," she admitted. "Or maybe I'm just tired of being the cautious storekeeper's daughter." After a moment he nodded. "One night, then I'm gone." Josephine stepped back from the window. "Come inside before someone sees you." As Zachary Zimmerman climbed through her window, Josephine Parker had no way of knowing that this one impulsive act of kindness would set in motion events that would test everything she believed about courage, loyalty, and love. Nor could she have guessed that the mysterious cowboy with the gun at his side would become her greatest ally in a town about to erupt in violence and greed. The storage room was small but clean, with a narrow cot that her father sometimes used during inventory days. Josephine provided Zachary with a basin of water, clean bandages, and the remains of her supper. "Thank you, Miss Parker," he said formally as she turned to leave. "Josephine," she corrected. "If you're going to hide in my home, you might as well use my name." "Josephine," he repeated, and something about the way he said it made her cheeks warm. "Good night, Mr. Zimmerman. Try not to bleed on my linens." His soft chuckle followed her as she closed the door. The next morning, Josephine woke at dawn as usual. For a moment, she wondered if she had dreamed the encounter with the mysterious cowboy, but when she passed the storage room, she heard steady breathing from within. He was still there. She prepared a simple breakfast of coffee, biscuits, and bacon, setting aside a portion for her guest. The store wouldn't open for another hour, giving them time to figure out what to do next. When she knocked softly on the storage room door, Zachary answered immediately. He looked better this morning. He'd washed the blood from his face and hands, and his dark hair was combed back neatly. The gun belt remained at his side, though, a constant companion. "I brought breakfast," she said, placing the tray on a small table. "You're too kind, Josephine," he gestured to his bandaged arm. "I've had worse." They ate in awkward silence until Josephine couldn't stand it anymore. "What's your plan? The sheriff will be watching the roads out of town." Zachary's expression remained neutral. "I have a horse hidden outside town. I'll leave at nightfall, head up through the mountain pass." "Alone with that arm," she frowned. "That pass is dangerous even for experienced riders." "I've been riding those mountains since I was 12, he said with quiet confidence. A loud knock at the store's front door interrupted them. Josephine jumped to her feet, her heart racing. "Stay here," she whispered, closing the storage room door firmly behind her. Through the store windows, she could see Sheriff Wilkins and 2 deputies. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, she unlocked the door. "Morning, Miss Parker," Wilkins said, removing his hat. "Hope we didn't wake you." "Not at all, Sheriff. I was just preparing to open." She smiled politely. "What can I do for you?" "We're looking for that card sharp from last night. Thought he might have tried to hide somewhere in town." Josephine feigned ignorance. "Have you checked the livery stable or the hotel?" "We've checked everywhere," one of the deputies said. "Man's vanished like smoke." Sheriff Wilkins's eyes narrowed. "Mind if we take a look around your store, Miss Parker, just to be thorough?" Her pulse quickened. "The store isn't open yet, Sheriff, and my father wouldn't approve of men trampling through our inventory without supervision." "Your father isn't here, is he?" Wilkins took a step closer. "Won't take but a minute." Josephine stood her ground, blocking the entrance. "Do you have a warrant, Sheriff?" His friendly demeanor slipped. "Don't need one when I'm chasing a criminal." "I believe the law says differently," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "If you want to search our property, you'll need proper documentation. My father is quite friendly with Judge Morris in Denver, as I'm sure you know." The mention of the judge made Wilkins pause. He studied her face, suspicion clear in his eyes. "You sure you haven't seen this fellow? Tall, dark hair, wounded in the arm. He's dangerous, Miss Parker." "I haven't seen anyone matching that description," she lied smoothly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for customers." After a tense moment, Wilkins put his hat back on. "Very well, but if you do see him, you come tell me right away. That's not a request." Josephine closed the door behind them, her hands trembling slightly. When she turned around, Zachary was standing in the doorway to the back room, his face grim. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "Done what? Lied to the sheriff, or protected you? Either, both." He ran a hand through his hair. "You don't know me, Josephine. I'm not worth getting in trouble over." She crossed her arms. "I believe I can decide that for myself, Mr. Zimmerman." A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "You're not what I expected from a small-town shopkeeper's daughter, and what did you expect? Someone less formidable." The compliment pleased her more than it should have. "Well, now the sheriff is suspicious. We need a better plan than waiting until nightfall." Zachary nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. "Does your father have a wagon?" "Yes, for deliveries." "Why?" "If I leave town in your wagon, hidden under supplies, I could reach the trail to the pass before anyone notices." Josephine considered this. "I sometimes make deliveries to the outlying farms. No one would question it." "It's too dangerous," Zachary protested. If you're caught helping me, I'm already involved, she pointed out, and I know these roads better than you do. He studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes intense. Why are you really helping me, Josephine Parker? She couldn't fully explain it herself, the immediate trust she felt, the strange connection. Let's just say I believe in giving people second chances. And what if I don't deserve one? Then I'm a poor judge of character, she smiled. But I don't think I am. By mid-morning, Josephine had opened the store as usual, serving the trickle of customers with her customary politeness while Zachary remained hidden. She sent word to Billy, the young boy who helped with deliveries, that she wouldn't need him today, she would handle the farm deliveries herself. When the store emptied around noon, she quickly loaded the wagon with the orders for the Hanson farm and the Miller place. At the bottom of the wagon, concealed beneath crates of supplies, she arranged blankets to cushion the ride for Zachary. You'll have to stay completely still until we're well out of town, she told him as he climbed into his hiding place. It's uncomfortable, but it's only for a few miles. I've endured worse, he said, settling in among the blankets. Josephine, thank you. She covered him with the crates, making sure he could still breathe. Don't thank me yet, Cowboy. We still have to get past the sheriff. Josephine drove the wagon slowly through Alta's main street, nodding politely to the people she passed. Her heart nearly stopped when she saw Sheriff Wilkins emerging from the saloon, but he merely tipped his hat to her and continued on his way. The tension in her shoulders began to ease as they left the town limits behind. The road to the Hanson farm wound through golden meadows dotted with wildflowers, the Rocky Mountains rising majestically in the distance. Once they were well out of sight of town, Josephine stopped the wagon. You can come out now, she called. Zachary pushed aside the crates and emerged, stretching his tall frame. Remind me never to become a shipment of dry goods again, he said, rolling his shoulders. Josephine laughed. You did well. We're halfway to the Hanson farm. From there, we can cut through their north pasture to reach the mountain trail. He climbed up beside her on the wagon seat, taking the reins from her hands. Their fingers brushed, and she felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. Up close in the bright sunlight, she could see flecks of blue in his gray eyes. I'll drive, he said. You've done enough already. As they continued along the road, Josephine found herself studying his profile, the strong jaw, the faint scar above his eyebrow, the way his hands held the reins with practiced ease. He was undeniably handsome, but there was something else about him that intrigued her, a depth, a complexity that belied his rough exterior. You're staring, he said without looking at her. I'm trying to figure you out, she admitted. I thought we agreed no questions. We did. But that doesn't stop me from being curious. She paused. You're not really a card sharp, are you? Zachary's mouth quirked. I never said I was. That was the sheriff's assumption. Then what? She stopped herself. Sorry, no questions. They drove in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels and the rhythmic clip-clop of the horses' hooves. The spring air was sweet with the scent of sage and pine. I was a Texas Ranger, Zachary said suddenly. Josephine looked at him in surprise. Was. For 5 years, until last winter. His expression darkened. Now I'm just a man trying to stay alive long enough to set things right. She wanted to ask more but respected their agreement. Instead, she said, whatever you're running from or toward, I hope you find what you're looking for. He glanced at her, his gaze warming. I'm beginning to think I might have already found something worth stopping for. Before Josephine could respond to this startling statement, a shot rang out, splintering the wood of the wagon seat between them. Zachary reacted instantly, pulling her down with one arm while reaching for his gun with the other. Get down and stay down, he shouted, scanning the landscape for the shooter. Another bullet whizzed past as Zachary returned fire. Josephine's heart pounded in her ears as she crouched on the wagon floor, her skirts tangled around her legs. Can you see who it is? She asked. 2 riders coming fast from the east. Zachary fired again, then urged the horses to a gallop. Hold on tight. The wagon lurched forward, bouncing violently over the uneven road. Crates and packages tumbled around them as Zachary steered the team off the main trail and into a stand of aspens. Josephine risked a glance back and saw two men on horseback giving chase. One wore a deputy's badge. "It's the sheriff's men, not just his men," Zachary said grimly. "The one on the right is Carter Walsh. He's the one I supposedly cheated, and he's been after me since Fort Worth." The wagon wheels hit a deep rut, nearly throwing Josephine over the side. Zachary caught her arm, pulling her back. His face was set in determined lines as he guided the team through the trees. "The wagon's too slow," he said. "We need to unhitch the horses." "What? We can't abandon the wagon. We don't have a choice." He handed her the reins. "Keep them steady while I get the harnesses." Despite the danger, Josephine couldn't help admiring his calm efficiency as he leaped down and quickly freed the team from the wagon. The pursuers were closing in, their shouts carrying on the wind. Zachary swung back up beside her, this time on one of the freed horses. He extended his hand. "Come on." Josephine hesitated only a second before taking his hand and allowing him to pull her up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist as he spurred the horse forward, the second horse following on a lead rope. They galloped through the aspen grove and up a steep slope, the horse's powerful muscles bunching and stretching beneath them. Josephine had never ridden so fast or so recklessly in her life. Her bonnet flew off, her hair coming loose from its pins to stream behind her like a dark banner. Despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, she felt more alive than she ever had before. The solid warmth of Zachary's body against hers, the thundering hooves, the wind in her face. It was exhilarating. When they crested the ridge, Zachary finally slowed the horse to a walk. Below them stretched a hidden valley, lush with spring grass and sheltered by towering pines. A small creek glinted silver in the afternoon sun. "We'll rest here," he said, helping her dismount. "They won't find this place easily." Josephine's legs wobbled as she stood. "Who is Carter Walsh? And why is he so determined to find you?" Zachary's face hardened. "I told you don't ask." "Those men shot at me too," she pointed out. "I think I deserve to know why," he sighed, leading the horses to the creek. "Walsh is a cattle baron from Texas. Also a murderer, thief, and all-around villain, though he presents himself as a respectable businessman." "And what's your connection to him?" Zachary was silent for so long that Josephine thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "My last assignment as a ranger was to infiltrate his operation. I spent 6 months working for him, gathering evidence of his crimes." "Did you succeed?" "Too well." His voice was bitter. "I had enough to put him away for life, but before I could deliver the evidence, Walsh discovered who I was. My partner was killed. I barely escaped with my life and the evidence." Josephine's eyes widened. "You still have it," he tapped his chest. "Right here. Documents proving Walsh ordered the murder of 3 homesteading families to take their land. Names, dates, payment records, everything." "Why not take it to the authorities?" "Walsh has connections, judges, politicians, lawmen like your Sheriff Wilkins. I need to get this evidence to someone I can trust, someone beyond Walsh's reach." Josephine processed this information, pieces falling into place. "So you weren't cheating at cards?" "I was trying to win enough money to buy passage on the eastbound train. Walsh's men recognized me before I could." She studied his face, seeing the weariness and determination etched there. "I believe you, Zachary." Something in his expression softened. "That means more than you know." They made a small camp in the valley, using Zachary's skills to create shelter from pine boughs. As evening approached, Josephine found herself sitting beside him near a tiny, smokeless fire, sharing the provisions she'd packed for the farm deliveries. "What about you?" he asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Have you lived in Alta all your life?" She shook her head. "We came from Philadelphia 5 years ago after my mother died. My father thought the mountain air would be good for us both, and he saw opportunity in a growing mining town." "Do you miss the city?" "Sometimes." Josephine gazed into the flames. "I miss the libraries, the museums, the music, but I've grown to love the mountains too. You don't strike me as a woman who's content to spend her life running a general store in a mining town." She smiled wryly. "Is it that obvious?" To someone who's watching, yes. The way he said it, someone who's watching, made her pulse quicken. "I want more than Alta can offer," she admitted. "I want to see places I've only read about in books, to have adventures instead of just selling supplies to people who are having them." "Adventure is overrated," Zachary said quietly. "Sometimes I think a quiet life in one place would be the greatest adventure of all." Their eyes met across the fire, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. In the gathering darkness, with the stars emerging overhead and the soft murmur of the creek nearby, it was easy to forget the danger they faced. Zachary cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Josephine nodded, suddenly shy. "Where will we go from here?" "There's a telegraph station at Cooper's Ridge, about 20 miles north. I have a friend there who can help get this evidence to the federal marshal in Denver." "And then what?" He looked at her curiously. "Then you go home to Alta, and I keep running until Walsh is behind bars." She wanted to protest, to suggest alternatives where they didn't have to part, but she knew how foolish that would sound. They barely knew each other, despite the intimacy forced upon them by circumstance. "Of course," she said, trying to keep the disappointment from her voice. "That makes the most sense." As she settled onto the bed of pine needles, wrapped in the blanket he'd given her, Josephine wondered when exactly her feelings for this mysterious cowboy had shifted from cautious interest to something deeper and more dangerous. Morning brought a new urgency as they spotted smoke signals rising from different points around the valley. "Walsh's men have enlisted local help," Zachary said grimly, saddling the horses with swift efficiency. "They're closing in." "How far to Cooper's Ridge?" Josephine asked, gathering their few belongings. "If we push hard, we can make it by nightfall." They rode double again, setting a grueling pace through increasingly rugged terrain. Zachary seemed to know these mountains intimately, following game trails and hidden passes that weren't visible until you were right upon them. By midday, they had climbed high enough that Josephine could look back and see the vast expanse of wilderness they'd traversed. The view was breathtaking: endless forests, silver ribbons of streams, distant peaks still capped with snow. In another circumstance, she would have reveled in the beauty. "How did you learn to navigate these mountains so well?" she asked as they paused to rest the horses. A shadow crossed Zachary's face. "My father was a trapper. We lived in a cabin not far from here when I was a boy." This small personal detail felt significant, of voluntary sharing of his past. "Is he still alive?" "No, died in a mining accident when I was 14. Zachary's expression grew distant. "After that, I headed to Texas, worked cattle drives until I became a ranger, and your mother died when I was born." He offered a half smile. "It was just my father and me against the world." "I understand that feeling," Josephine said softly. "Since my mother passed, father has been my only family." Zachary studied her face, his eyes softening. "He must be worried about you." "Probably furious is more accurate," she sighed. "I've never done anything like this before." "Do you regret it, helping me?" The question hung between them, weighted with unspoken implications. Josephine met his gaze steadily. "No," she said simply. "I don't regret it at all." Something in his expression shifted, a barrier falling away. He stepped closer, his hand rising to touch her cheek. Josephine's breath caught in her throat as he leaned down, his intention clear. The crack of a rifle shattered the moment. Zachary reacted instantly, pushing her behind a boulder as bullets peppered the ground where they'd been standing. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his gun and returning fire. Josephine's heart hammered in her chest as she peered around the boulder. 3 men on horseback were advancing up the trail, rifles aimed in their direction. "It's Walsh," Zachary said, his voice tight, "and 2 of his men." "What do we do? We're trapped here." Zachary checked his ammunition, his expression grim. "I'll hold them off while you take the horses and head for Cooper's Ridge. Follow the creek north until you reach a split rock formation, then turn east." I'm not leaving you, Josephine protested. This isn't a debate, Josephine. That evidence has to reach the authorities. He pressed a folded paper into her hand. My friend's name is Marcus Turner. Give him this note and the evidence. He'll know what to do. She clutched his arm. Come with me. We can outrun them. Another bullet ricocheted off the boulder, sending stone chips flying. Zachary's face was resolute. Go, now, while I've got their attention. Josephine knew he was right, but the thought of leaving him to face 3 armed men alone was unbearable. Promise me you'll follow. I promise. He cupped her face in his hands, his eyes intense. Josephine Parker, I will find you again. Then he kissed her hard, desperate, and far too brief. Before she could respond, he pulled away and turned to fire at their attackers. Go, he commanded. With tears blurring her vision, Josephine ran to the horses. As she mounted, she looked back to see Zachary positioning himself behind the boulder, his gun steady in his hand. He nodded once, and she spurred the horse forward, leading the second animal behind her. The sound of gunfire followed her as she rode away, each shot making her flinch. But she didn't stop, didn't look back again. The evidence in her bodice and the memory of Zachary's kiss drove her forward. She followed his directions, pushing the horses as fast as she dared over the rocky terrain. The split rock formation appeared as promised, an ancient monolith cleaved by time and weather. Turning east, she entered a narrow canyon where the walls rose steep on either side, creating natural protection from both pursuers and the elements. As dusk fell, Josephine finally spotted smoke rising from chimneys in the distance. Cooper's Ridge was a small settlement, little more than a cluster of buildings surrounding the telegraph station, but to her exhausted eyes it looked like salvation. She rode directly to the telegraph office, dismounting on shaky legs. The clerk looked up in surprise as she entered, her dress torn and dirty, her hair wild around her face. I need to speak with Marcus Turner, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. It's urgent, the clerk frowned. Mr. Turner's at the boarding house. Who's asking? Tell him Zachary Zimmerman sent me. The man's eyebrows rose, but he nodded and hurried out. Left alone, Josephine sank onto a bench, the events of the past 2 days catching up with her in a wave of exhaustion and worry. Where was Zachary now? Had he escaped Walsh and his men? The memory of gunfire echoing through the mountains haunted her. The door opened, and a tall man with a silver-streaked beard entered. I'm Marcus Turner, he said, his keen eyes assessing her. You have a message from Zach. Josephine produced the folded note and the evidence Zachary had entrusted to her. He said you'd know what to do with these. Turner read the note quickly, then examined the documents with a low whistle. This is enough to hang Walsh 10 times over. Will you help? Zachary is in danger. Walsh and his men found us in the mountains. And Zach stayed behind to cover your escape. Turner nodded as if this was exactly what he expected. That sounds like him. We need to send help, Josephine insisted. I'll do better than that. Turner pocketed the evidence. I'll wire the federal marshal's office in Denver immediately, then organize a search party. We'll find him. I'm coming with you. Turner looked like he might argue, then apparently thought better of it. You care about him. It wasn't a question, but Josephine answered anyway. Yes. More than makes sense, given how little time we've known each other. A smile creased Turner's weathered face. Time isn't always the best measure of such things. Rest here while I send the telegram. We'll leave at first light. Josephine spent a restless night at the local boarding house, her mind filled with images of Zachary facing Walsh's men alone. By dawn, she was ready to join the search party. Turner had assembled 6 men, all former lawmen or soldiers, armed and mounted on sturdy horses. We'll retrace your path, Turner told her as they rode out. With luck, we'll find Zach before Walsh's men do more damage. The journey back through the mountains seemed both familiar and strange. Josephine led them to the split rock, then back to the clearing where she'd last seen Zachary. The signs of the gunfight were evident: bullet holes in trees and rocks, spent casings on the ground, but there was no sign of Zachary or Walsh's men. There was a lot of shooting, one of Turner's men observed, examining the scene. Blood here and over there too. Josephine's stomach clenched. Can you tell what happened? The man, a former army scout, studied the ground carefully. 3 men arrived on horseback. 1 man was already here. He pointed to different spots. Fighting started here, then moved that way. Someone was dragged. See how the dirt is disturbed. Then 4 horses left, heading south. They took him, Josephine whispered, her worst fears confirmed. Turner's face was grim. If they wanted him dead, they'd have left his body. They took him alive, which means Walsh wants something. The evidence, Josephine realized. Walsh doesn't know Zachary gave it to me, which gives us an advantage. Turner signaled to his men, "We'll follow their trail. Miss Parker, you should return to Cooper's Ridge." "No," her voice was firm, "I'm coming with you." Turner studied her determined expression and nodded. "Stay close and do exactly as I say." They followed the trail south, moving cautiously through forests and across mountain meadows. By mid-afternoon, they spotted smoke rising from a clearing ahead, a small camp nestled in a protected hollow. Turner signaled for everyone to dismount and approach on foot. Through the trees, Josephine could make out 3 horses and a crude lean-to. 2 men sat by a fire, while a third figure, Zachary, was tied to a tree, his head slumped forward. Her heart leaped at the sight of him, then constricted with fear when she saw the blood staining his shirt. He was alive, but clearly injured. Turner gathered the men to plan their approach. "We need to take them by surprise," he whispered. "2 of you circle around to the east, 2 to the west. Johnson and I will approach from here. Miss Parker, you stay with the horses." Josephine nodded reluctantly, knowing she would be more hindrance than help in a gunfight. As the men spread out to take their positions, she retreated to where they'd left the horses tethered. The sudden crack of a twig behind her was her only warning before a rough hand clamped over her mouth. "Don't make a sound," a voice growled in her ear. Carter Walsh, she recognized him from Zachary's descriptions. He dragged her toward the camp, a gun pressed to her ribs. "Look what I found sneaking around," he called as they emerged from the trees. The 2 men by the fire jumped to their feet, weapons drawn. At the tree, Zachary's head snapped up, his eyes widening in horror when he saw Josephine in Walsh's grip. "Let her go, Walsh," Zachary said, his voice hoarse. "She has nothing to do with this." Walsh laughed. "I think she does. Your little girlfriend here is part of your plan, isn't she? Where's the evidence, Zimmerman? I told you I lost it when you attacked us in the mountains." Walsh pressed the gun harder against Josephine's side, making her gasp. "Maybe she'll be more forthcoming." "She doesn't know anything," Zachary insisted, straining against his bonds. "This is between you and me. I think I'll ask her myself." Walsh turned Josephine to face him, his breath hot on her face. "Where is it, girl? Where did Zimmerman hide the evidence?" Josephine met his gaze steadily, summoning all her courage. "I don't know what you're talking about." Walsh's face darkened. "We'll see about that." He nodded to one of his men. "Start with Zimmerman. Maybe she'll find her memory when she sees what happens to her friend." The man drew a knife and approached Zachary, who stared back defiantly. Josephine's mind raced, trying to think of a way to stall until Turner and his men could attack. "Wait," she cried. I have the evidence." Walsh's grip loosened slightly in surprise. "Where? It's hidden." "I can take you to it," she swallowed hard. "But you have to let Zachary go first." "Josephine, no." Zachary's voice was anguished. Walsh laughed. "You're in no position to make demands, girl. Tell me where it is or watch him die slowly." A gunshot suddenly rang out and one of Walsh's men crumpled to the ground. Chaos erupted as Turner and his men opened fire from the surrounding forest. Walsh yanked Josephine in front of him as a shield, backing toward the horses. "Drop your weapons or I kill the girl," he shouted. The firing stopped. In the sudden silence, Josephine could hear her own rapid breathing and the pounding of her heart. "Let her go, Walsh," Turner's voice called from the trees. "You're surrounded." Walsh's arm tightened around Josephine's throat. "Throw out the evidence first." While Walsh's attention was focused on the forest, Josephine saw Zachary working silently at his bonds. The second henchman, distracted by the standoff, had moved away from him to take cover. Meeting Zachary's eyes, Josephine made a split-second decision. She went limp in Walsh's grip, as if fainting, forcing him to adjust his hold. In that moment of distraction, she drove her elbow hard into his stomach. Walsh grunted in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Josephine to wrench free. She threw herself to the ground as multiple shots rang out. When she looked up, Walsh was on his knees, blood blooming across his chest. Behind him stood Zachary, somehow freed from his bonds, the dead henchman's gun smoking in his hand. "Josephine." Zachary dropped the gun and rushed to her side, gathering her into his arms despite his own injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, clinging to him as Turner and his men emerged from the trees. "I thought I'd lost you." His arms tightened around her. "I promised I'd find you again, didn't I?" Turner approached, eyeing Walsh's body dispassionately. "Federal marshals should be here by tomorrow. They can handle the cleanup." Zachary nodded, still holding Josephine close. "Thank you, Marcus, I owe you. You owe this young lady more, I'd say." Turner smiled kindly at Josephine. "She wouldn't rest until we found you." As Turner's men secured the surviving henchmen and made camp, Zachary led Josephine to a quiet spot by a small stream. His face was bruised, and dried blood caked his temple, but his eyes were clear as he looked at her. "You shouldn't have come back for me," he said, though there was no reproach in his voice, only wonder. "I couldn't leave you." Josephine touched his face gently, tracing the line of his jaw. "Not when." "When what?" She took a deep breath. "Not when I think I might be falling in love with you." The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable. For a moment, Zachary just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled her close, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that spoke more eloquently than words. When they finally broke apart, his eyes held a light she hadn't seen before. "I've been running so long, I forgot what it felt like to want to stay somewhere, with someone. And now I'm thinking that Alta might be a good place to put down roots." His smile was tender. "If a certain shopkeeper's daughter would welcome the company." Josephine laughed softly. "I think she might, though her father will take some convincing." "I can be very persuasive," Zachary murmured, drawing her into his arms again. As the sun set over the mountains, casting the world in gold and shadow, Josephine Parker knew that her life had changed irrevocably in the space of 3 days. The adventure she had longed for had found her not in distant lands or ancient cities, but in the heart of a cowboy with secrets in his past and promise in his smile. 2 weeks later, Josephine stood behind the counter of her father's store, smiling as Mrs. Hanson praised the quality of the new bolts of fabric that had arrived from Denver. Her father, initially furious about her disappearance with the delivery wagon, had gradually softened as the full story emerged. The arrival of federal marshals in Alta, the arrest of Sheriff Wilkins for corruption, and the news that Carter Walsh, a man wanted for multiple murders in Texas, had been killed while resisting arrest, had created quite a sensation in the small mining town. Josephine's role in these events made her something of a local celebrity, though most of the details remained known only to a few. "Your young man was in earlier," Mrs. Hanson said with a knowing smile. "Buying lumber," he said, "something about building a law office." Josephine felt her cheeks warm. "Mr. Zimmerman is hardly my young man, Mrs. Hanson." "Not yet, perhaps." The older woman winked. "But I've seen the way he looks at you." After Mrs. Hanson left, Josephine's father emerged from the storeroom, account book in hand. "That Turner fellow sent a telegram," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Says the federal marshal's office in Denver is offering Zimmerman a position as a special investigator. Good salary, respectable work." Josephine focused on arranging a display of canned goods. "That's wonderful news." "Is it?" Her father studied her face. "I thought you might be disappointed that he'd be leaving Alta." "He hasn't mentioned leaving." She met her father's gaze. "In fact, he's been looking at property on Main Street for his law office." Mr. Parker's eyebrows rose. "A lawman and a lawyer." "Ambitious fellow." "He studied law before becoming a Texas Ranger," Josephine explained. "He wants to put his knowledge to better use now." Her father was silent for a moment, absently straightening his spectacles. "You care for this man." It wasn't a question, but Josephine answered anyway. "Yes, father, I do. You've known him barely 3 weeks. Sometimes that's enough to know." She touched her father's arm gently. "Mother wrote that you proposed to her after only 2 weeks." A smile softened his stern features. "She told you that, did she?" He sighed. "Your mother would like him, I think. He has integrity." This unexpected approval brought tears to Josephine's eyes. "Thank you, father." The bell over the door jingled, and Zachary himself walked in, hat in hand. He looked different from the desperate fugitive who had appeared on her balcony clean-shaven, his dark hair neatly trimmed, wearing a new suit that complemented his broad shoulders. But the gun still hung at his side, a reminder of the dangers they'd faced together. "Mr. Parker," he nodded respectfully. "Miss Parker, Mr. Zimmerman." Her father extended his hand. "I understand congratulations are in order. A position with the Federal Marshal's office is quite prestigious." Zachary shook the offered hand. "Thank you, sir. Though I've decided to establish my practice here in Alta first. The town needs a good lawyer, especially now that the previous leadership has been replaced." "Indeed." Mr. Parker glanced between them, then cleared his throat. "If you'll excuse me, I have some inventory to attend to." As her father retreated to the storeroom, Josephine moved from behind the counter. "A special investigator, you didn't tell me about the offer." "I just received the telegram this morning." Zachary stepped closer. "I wanted to discuss it with you first." "With me? Why?" His eyes, warm and sincere, held hers. "Because any decision I make now affects you too, at least I hope it does." Josephine's heart quickened. "Zachary, I know it's fast," he said softly. "Too fast, probably. But when you've spent years running, you learn to recognize what's worth stopping for." He took her hand in his. "You asked me once what brought me to Alta. I think now it was fate." "Is that what a logical lawyer believes? Fate?" she teased gently. "I believe in what I can see and touch." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "And what I see in you is everything I never knew I was looking for." The store was quiet, sunlight streaming through the windows to create patterns on the wooden floor. In that moment of perfect stillness, Josephine felt her future shifting, aligning with this man who had appeared in her life like a character from the adventure novels she loved to read. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Zimmerman?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, that transformative smile that had first caught her attention. "Nothing formal, not yet, just the promise of more time together, the chance to build something meaningful here in Alta." And the marshal's position. "I told them I'd be available for special assignments, but my home would be here." His expression grew serious. "If that's what you want too." Josephine thought of the life she had imagined for herself, the far-off places, the grand adventures. But standing here with Zachary, she understood that adventure wasn't always about distance traveled. "I want you to stay," she said simply. "The rest we can figure out together." His smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Then I'll stay." In the months that followed, Alta underwent a transformation. With Wilkins and his corrupt deputies gone, the town elected a new sheriff, a former Army officer with a reputation for fairness. Zachary's law practice flourished as miners, merchants, and homesteaders sought his counsel. And when the territorial governor appointed him as a circuit judge for the region, no one in Alta was surprised. Josephine continued to work in her father's store, but she also began writing articles for the local newspaper, documenting the town's history and the stories of its residents. Her first published piece, an account of a Texas Ranger's fight for justice against a powerful cattle baron, attracted attention from publications as far away as Denver and San Francisco. Their courtship progressed under the watchful eyes of the townspeople, who quickly accepted Zachary as one of their own. He built a small house on a piece of land overlooking the valley, with large windows to capture the mountain views Josephine loved so much. On a crisp autumn evening, exactly 6 months after they had met, Zachary took Josephine riding to their favorite spot, a high meadow where wildflowers still bloomed despite the approaching winter. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, he knelt before her with a small velvet box in his hand. "Josephine Parker," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes, "when you found me on your balcony that night, I was a man with nothing but secrets and regrets. You asked for neither, yet gave me everything: your trust, your courage, your heart." He opened the box to reveal a ring with a modest diamond flanked by small sapphires. "This was my mother's. My father carried it with him always, a reminder of the love they shared." He took a deep breath. "I'm asking you to be my wife, my partner, my home. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Josephine's vision as she looked from the ring to the face of the man she had come to love so deeply. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Zachary Zimmerman, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, Josephine thought of their first meeting, a desperate cowboy with a gun at his side who had said, "Don't ask," and her reply that had changed everything. "I won't, if you stay." He had stayed. And in staying, had given her the greatest adventure of all. Their wedding took place the following spring, with the entire town of Alta in attendance. Marcus Turner came from Denver to stand as Zachary's best man, bringing news that the last of Walsh's criminal network had been dismantled, thanks to the evidence Zachary had gathered. "You're free now," Turner told him at the reception. "No more looking over your shoulder." Zachary's arm tightened around his new wife's waist. "I've been free since the day Josephine took a chance on a stranger at her window." As Alta grew from a mining camp into a proper town, the Zimmermans became central to its development. Zachary's reputation as a fair and knowledgeable judge spread throughout the territory, while Josephine's writing career blossomed. Her stories of frontier life, particularly those featuring strong women and the men who respected them, found an eager audience in the East. They welcomed their first child, a son named Thomas, a year after their wedding, followed by a daughter, Elizabeth, 2 years later. Their home became known as a place of warmth and hospitality, open to travelers, newcomers, and anyone in need of assistance. On their 5th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset, Josephine leaned her head against Zachary's shoulder. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The excitement, the danger," he chuckled, his hand finding hers. "Not for a second. Though I do enjoy watching you chase our children around the yard, that's excitement enough for me," she smiled. "And to think, all of this because I decided to help a mysterious cowboy with a gun." "No," Zachary said softly, turning to meet her gaze. "All of this because you saw something in me worth saving, worth keeping." He kissed her gently. "I promised I'd find you again, remember? And I intend to keep finding you every day for the rest of our lives." As twilight deepened into night and the first stars appeared above the mountains, Josephine Zimmerman reflected on the unexpected turns her life had taken. The adventure she had longed for as a young woman hadn't come in the form of distant travels or grand explorations, but in the daily discoveries of building a life with the man she loved. And as their children slept peacefully inside and Zachary's strong arm encircled her shoulders, she knew she wouldn't trade this adventure for any other in the world.